Briefing. I'm Lori McCulley, and I head our Treasury Technology practice. I'm joined today by my colleagues Jeff Diorio and Elaine Filas, principals in our Treasury Technology practice. Every quarter, we'll bring you our perspective on the ecosystem of technology that enables Treasury visibility and analytics for the management of cash, trade, and risk worldwide. A few logistics before we start. We will end in 30 minutes. We welcome questions following the webcast, but we'll reply off the air to keep the session on time. For all participants, we'll send the presentation and a link to the recording. In each of our quarterly briefings, we'll follow the same sections. We will cover what we believe to be the most important things our clients need to know as they address their technology needs. That starts with our take on the big issues in the Treasury technology space today, along with what trends we're hearing from our clients in our work. We'll also address what we're calling the game changers. This will be focused on how technology helps clients keep up with the most important issues they face. Today, we'll look at how regulation will impact Treasury technology and whether companies and solution providers are really ready for it. For a few years now, Treasury Strategies has been describing an evolution of Treasury's role into the financial hub for their organization as a movement toward 3.0. We'll describe how our clients can progress to the specific infrastructure that will support that journey. Finally, we want to relate client experiences that illustrate how Treasury technology projects can be a success instead of a failure. So we'll talk specifically about how the best organizations get across the finish line on these types of initiatives. First, Jeff will provide our take on current industry happenings and what our clients are saying too.
Hi, this is Jeff Diorio. We define the current Treasury technology industry as not only Treasury system vendors, but anything involving bank technology, trading portals, financial connectivity, and the list goes on and on. The industry is confronted with challenges and opportunities involving, number 1, consolidation, number 2, convergence, number 3, big data, and number 4, regulation. Let me say those again because I think they're so important. Consolidation, convergence, big data, and regulation. We'll talk briefly about these 4 big issues because it will impact your ability to do your job better and with the best technology tools. The Treasury technology market is undergoing a transformation, a mega trend really. That's manifested itself in the form of consolidation of long-time system providers, emergence of new money and entrants, as well as the convergence of functions within Treasury technology. Yet, at the same time as the consolidation has happened with long-time solution vendors in the market, there is an emergence of new players. Over the last year, we've had several conversations with private equity and venture capital funds looking to invest in the technology industry. New money coming in will benefit our clients. More choices, along with deeper pockets for existing vendors to invest in functional areas. On the convergence side, convergence is also something we see more and more of now. The coming together of cash, risk, desktop, and mobile, even harmonization of regulation across borders. Does that mean a single system? We used to advocate a single platform for most Treasury functions, but we know that integration is critical for all clients to get the most out of their infrastructure. Whether it's one ERP system or many platforms, a treasury management system, investment portal, market data provider, etc. A focus now on enterprise-wide functionality befits Treasury's strategic role and expansion in the CFO chain of command. But clients will always have many tools that really call for integration. And when it's all pulled together, what results? Big data. There's an explosion in the amount of data available to our clients. But is it accessible for quick decision making? The good news is that all solution providers, particularly enterprise-wide systems, are helping their customers harness the power of the system, recognizing the amount of information contained in the platform. Yesterday's Wall Street Journal had an article on how big data can benefit CFOs. If you can't report out of a platform, how good is it? To put it another way, once you've analyzed data and compared it to your key performance metrics, that's when you start to improve processes. It's really a 360-degree effort. And in future briefing, we'll be discussing potential solution provider efforts to make big data something more akin to relevant and accessible information and intelligence. Meanwhile, you can't continue to bury your head in the sand about regulation. Some of our clients are leading the way on being ready, but too many companies are in a wait-and-see mode. While regulation is still being vetted and implemented, it's not too early to examine whether you're ready for what's coming. Lori will cover that in more depth later on. It's important to consider what our clients are saying about a number of different subjects as they relate to technology. We posed 2 questions to clients with whom we're working now, as well as our LinkedIn group membership, which numbers 27,000 participants across a number of groups. Following on our earlier observations that Convergence is changing the market for Treasury technology, first we asked our clients if they thought Treasury workstations are a thing of the past.
We got a resounding no. 79% of people said they are not. While someone commented that they thought of a workstation as possibly an older term, something off in the corner dialing up a bank, it doesn't really matter what you call your system as long as it serves all of your needs.
Yes, especially if you think of a Treasury workstation as a Treasury hub, converging cash, risk, operations, analytics, and strategy all together.
One respondent mentioned that workstations will always have a place because spreadsheets are reactive more than proactive. I find that really interesting because often we see in our work that spreadsheets as too cumbersome really describes how corporates use spreadsheets for cash management, while at the same time, spreadsheets are viewed as very flexible by the capital market side of Treasury. That is more proactive, but still not ideal.
The bottom line is, whether you're using an ERP Treasury module, Treasury workstation, Treasury management system, bank technology, or a patchwork, it needs to enable Treasury. Our second question dealt with technology's impact on the role of the corporate treasurer, with 69% of respondents believing technology does increase a treasurer's capability for strategic impact. 17% thought technology helps enable analytics. We also got a lot of comments on this one.
Some of our clients feel that technology allows treasurers to spend more time thinking and less doing, which is the only way they can become more strategic, really. At the same time, Jeff, you can't have strategy without tactics to put it in play, and people feel that's where technology comes in too.
Don't you think it's interesting that many of our clients don't follow the ongoing technology investment advice here? Unless you consider paying annual bank service fees for a bank web portal access or yearly maintenance for a Treasury system. And I don't think that's what the person meant in saying this.
Yes, when they said Treasury needs to allow for ongoing technology investments rather than looking at it every 5 to 10 years, I think that's what you're really talking about. And yes, while certainly banks are making their portals more and more functional and really trying to follow the convergence of cash and risk model, what about what our clients didn't say here in this question?
We were surprised that respondents didn't get into specifics about how they thought technology should increase Treasury capabilities, just that it should. Stay tuned for us to address that question in the next quarter.
Turning to one of the big issues, we'll discuss technology and regulation. Any one of these potential regulatory game changers for Treasury could be the subject of its own webinar, so we'll just drill down on two of these today: worldwide derivative legislation and the global attempt to regulate money market funds. We hear from our financial services clients that regulation now consumes 130% of their technology budget. And we're now at that part of the regulatory cycle where as regulations reach implementation dates, ripple effects flow through to end-user clients. Compliance with financial regulation directly impacts corporate Treasury, and in so doing, puts a burden on the technology that Treasury uses to support their activities and associated compliance. If we look at global regulation intended to make derivatives more transparent, we see 5 primary requirements for corporate Treasury technology and our clients. Most of what I'll cover involves compliance for interest rate derivatives. The first is the ability to do optimized hedge analysis. Most of our corporate clients who use derivatives have elected the end-user clearing exemption. That's based primarily on the cost of collateral and administrative expenses that are associated with clearing. But over time, as regulations and other market phenomena evolve, i.e. Basel III, counterparty risk concerns, and others, the decision will become less and less clear. End users will need a way to compare the various factors, including cost of collateral, credit, pricing, accounting, and economics fit, to decide the extent to which their hedging strategy should incorporate purely uncleared over-the-counter swaps, futures, cleared over-the-counter swaps, or some combination of the three. Many of these variables may seem like apples and oranges, and an appropriate comparison of them requires a technology solution. The second is deal management, system storage, valuation, and reporting capability. Companies that are required to or choose to use cleared swaps will need systems that are capable of storing, valuing, and reporting on those. Those swaps have to be valued, and those electing the end-user exception may need technology that allows them to capture and report on the key data necessary to claim that end-user exemption. The third impact is on reporting capability. Although registered U.S. swap dealers will be required to report those trades to which they're a party, corporate end users could have to report some trades too. In particular, they will be required to report trades executed with non-U.S. non-swap dealers and some intercompany or inter-affiliate trades that are subject to inter-affiliate trade reporting relief or are subject to European inter-affiliate trade reporting requirements. That's all to say that there is complexity to this issue, but reporting requirements in Europe begin in January of next year and in the U.S. at dates ranging from now through the fall. Can your technology identify those trades and integrate with clearing counterparties? It also involves counterparty, jurisdiction, and regulatory requirements tracking. Large, complex organizations will need to manage regulatory classifications of their entities and their counterparty entities. So that means that there's further need to understand the regulatory requirements around those transactions, and you have to have systems that allow them to store and manage this information. That's going to become essential for navigating regulatory complexity for multinational companies or global organizations. The fourth is portfolio reconciliation. Corporate end users are permitted to decline banks' requests to reconcile their swap portfolios in the U.S., but in Europe, end users must enter into portfolio reconciliation likely once per year or once per quarter. How are you going to satisfy those portfolio reconciliation requirements? There may be some infrastructure providers that provide that support, but at what cost for smaller hedgers? And the final piece of derivative regulation impact on technology is that of confirmation and matching. Entities that clear their swaps, that's corporates too, will need to affirm them or confirm them electronically. But even those that don't clear their swaps will face increasing pressure to confirm trades electronically in order to meet the requirements to document the trades within specified time frames, We've seen some of our clients who have difficulty with the confirmation process because it's too paper-centric, and that's only going to increase, that difficulty will only increase when we move to greater regulation on this front. Money market fund regulation is still in question, both in the U.S. and Europe. We are of the opinion, though, that existing technology alternatives in the traditional Treasury management system space are not great at handling the entire workflow for the existing stable net asset value money market funds. Traditionally, clients rely on investment portal providers for the bulk of reporting and analytics. And while that may not change, the integration from investment portals to corporate Treasury technology is now paramount with this looming regulation. It really affects everything in the investment workflow. From the deal analytics side, technology must offer functionality to determine best investment options for short-term or medium liquidity when you have a variable net asset value money market fund. Of course, many companies use Bloomberg for that now, but some companies don't have Bloomberg. Deal execution. Can your portal integrate to your environment to transmit trade details? And as I said earlier, too many Treasury systems treat money market funds as a bank account with a balance varying depending on redemption or investment. If VNAV is enacted, it will need to be a security with floating price, with the ability to manage deal type to track the share price, deal redemption, can you update the price, liquidate shares, calculate gains and losses, confirming your investment, getting the appropriate market data for it, valuing it, accounting it for it. Technology needs to be able to classify and account for these instruments differently. And finally, reporting. This is a more complex reporting requirement for a floating price instrument that represents a security than what we've currently got. We are releasing a major study sponsored by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in 2 days that shows a $4.5 billion impact on corporate treasurers of this one regulation alone. And we've developed a floating net asset value ROI calculator that's available on our website for those corporations who are concerned about the cost of compliance with this potential regulation. The next section of today's briefing is designed to show how we're helping clients think about how to get to 3.0. This is a pretty simple chart, right? Increasing and broadening of corporate treasury responsibilities, greater requirements for technology and integration support with internal and external stakeholders that goes along with that. So, with increasing remit and increasing infrastructure comes a greater focus on strategy and analytics to address the broader financial needs of the organization, and an ongoing process of expanding that infrastructure in support of the organization. Technology, as we said earlier, really represents a continual investment rather than a large outlay for corporate clients once every 5 to 10 years. Our bank clients budget a lot for technology. Why doesn't Treasury? A treasurer at one of our clients said recently, and I think they said it best, I budget annually for technology to strategically run the organization. Change the organization effort may entail greater IT and resource attention from time to time, but we can't achieve our regular mission without technology. In other words, what they're saying is to progress to 3.0, infrastructure can't be neglected. Our final section of quarterly tech briefings is one in which we'll relate success stories about what can be painful and long projects, Treasury technology implementations. Jeff and Elaine will cover a recent situation where we helped our client get across the finish line.
Elaine Filas is a principal in her Treasury technology practice. Just completed a successful risk management implementation with a large multinational client that was on time and on budget. Elaine, from your perspective, what were some of the key factors that contributed to the success of this project?
Well, Jeff, there really were a number of factors, but I think the two that stand out for me were the comprehensive design phase and well-planned testing.
Elaine, how did you approach the system design?
Well, actually, we started the design well before the implementation began. We worked with our client to think through how a new system would be used from a policy, procedures, and controls perspective, really defining what they wanted the future state to look like at a very detailed level. We conducted a thorough design workshop of all functions, looking not only at each function in isolation, but also how all the Treasury activities work together. We got all the stakeholders in a given process around the table and flowcharted it out, taking notes of the data flows, the control points, integration points, and interfaces. You really have to know where you want to go before you can chart a course, or in this case, start to build the system. It made for a much more efficient implementation and helped us stay on time and on budget.
Thank you. Do you think it really matters for clients who are just looking to use technology for cash visibility or Treasury accounting, or is it only applicable to clients who have complex Treasury transactions?
Oh, definitely, Jeff. I would say you can't skip the design for any Treasury function, really not if you want to get the best results. With the new technology, Treasury processes did change for our client. Their existing procedures, which were based on an old homegrown application and Excel spreadsheets, needed improvement. And the new technology allowed them to streamline processes and automate controls. A lot of the benefit can come from taking a fresh look at the inputs to a process. For example, what type of data might improve our cash visibility in terms of positioning and forecasting. And I'm clearly taking a look at the outputs as well. Most of our clients have as a key objective improving the reporting from their Treasury platforms.
That sounds good, Elaine, but didn't that take a lot of time?
It may be counterintuitive, but a strong, comprehensive design can really save time as well. During configuration, our client was faced with a multitude of small decisions associated with complex transactions. Having that detailed design prevented a stalled configuration while these small decisions were made. And it can also prevent having to go back and redo something because it doesn't work with the way you've set up a related upstream or downstream process. This really helped us stay within our original timeline.
So that's a good example of a key differentiator for successful organizations at the beginning of an implementation. What was another point in the project when it might have gone off track but didn't?
Unfortunately, an easy way to appear to speed up an implementation is to give short shrift to formal testing. For this client, we developed a comprehensive test plan that defined all phases of testing, from unit testing early in the process through interface testing and user acceptance testing and parallel testing. Each phase added more comprehensive testing. In this project, we had 4 months dedicated to UAT and parallel testing. And that testing was very helpful in pinpointing where the configuration needed to be tweaked, where there were bugs, and where users weren't quite yet used to the system. You not only need to do the testing, but you need to document it too.
I have to ask, what do you mean by documented?
Well, in the case of UAT, for instance, there's documentation on the front end and the back end. On the front end, detailed test scripts are a foundation. Step-by-step scripts guided the testers through the different test scenarios and end-to-end workflow, and provided details regarding the expected results of the test. Having the test steps written out this way is also helpful for users who are still getting used to the new system. It almost becomes part of the training effort. Then on the back end, testing results must be documented. Very specifically, what were the details of each issue encountered? The more detail we could provide to the vendor about the issues, the more quickly the problem could be diagnosed and resolved. Again, keeping us on our timeline despite the numerous fixes that needed to be put in place. And for this client, once we created the test scripts, we actually uploaded them to a test management application, in this case, HP Quality Center, which really helped simplify the defect management process. It made it a very controlled and efficient process. We then took the results and turned them into effective project management tools.
What types of project management tools?
Well, as examples, we used the test results to create a daily test status report that was distributed to the project team and the vendor. Defect management is critical, and these reports were essential to that. Then we conducted regular test status meetings, semi-weekly at least, or at times even daily, where issues were discussed and next steps identified. This kept everyone aware of the issues and, more importantly, of any actions that were assigned to them.
Elaine, you've talked a lot about documentation for both design and testing. Are there any other uses for this documentation beyond the implementation?
As a matter of fact, Jeff, this documentation came in very handy when our client's internal audit group let us know that they would audit the implementation. And it was a very comprehensive audit of the implementation process. Defining the future state workflows up front saved us a lot of time when audit asked for the business requirements. We had the workflow schematics to share, as well as detailed narratives that had been created by the vendor. And when they asked for information about the testing process, we were ready too. Audit was able to access the test management application I mentioned earlier to review the detailed test scripts, and they could see directly in the system the evidence of the tests that had been completed successfully, as well as the detailed information about the status of the defects. Ultimately, the auditors were happy, and that made the whole project team very happy. And one example of how the documentation would be used after the implementation is over, the test scripts will also be valuable for future system upgrades. It's really a good idea to run through those test scripts again after each major upgrade.
Thanks for this advice, Elaine. In future segments of Getting to the Finish Line, we'll hear from various members of the TSI technology team about examples of how our clients have overcome various hurdles that they encountered in Treasury technology projects, whether it was losing staff resources to retirement or departures, what they did from a technology perspective in a merger or acquisition, or how they developed a rollout plan, taking into account global versus functional prioritization.
So as we help both our corporate and financial services clients address and succeed with technology, we have some advice we'd like to leave you with today. 1, be prepared for changes in the vendor landscape for Treasury technology. We've seen this now for the better part of 20 years. We've seen it before, both in terms of who's in the business and the way the systems are deployed, ERP, cloud, installed, software as a service. There's a lot happening in the space, and that's really nothing new. So it's okay. Number 2, define your Treasury needs with an eye to helping your Treasury become more strategic. But don't overlook the tactical pieces that you need too. Number 3, for all of our listeners, vendors, financial institutions, and corporates, stay ahead and abreast of regulatory changes that might call for flexible technology. And number 4, when it comes to implementing Treasury technology, give yourself the best chance for success by designing comprehensively and conducting thorough testing. Be sure to send us any questions you might have. We'll respond to those offline. And thanks to everyone who attended. Join us in October for our next Treasury technology briefing.